We're going to start the PRINCE2 Practitioner course with a PRINCE2 Foundation knowledge check. Remember, we want to build on solid foundation, and we want to make sure that you already have a good grasp of the basics that we taught in the foundation course. Because once we are certain about that, then we can start building on it. So here's how we will proceed. We're going to start with a foundation quiz. I will advise you that at the start of each question, once you've read the question and the possible answers, pause the recording and attempt to answer the question itself. At the end of it, you can play the recording back and see whether you got the answers right. Even if you got the answers right, it is worth listening to the recording to see what the rationale for the answer is. So, in this part of the course, we're going to have 10 multiple choice questions. A quick quiz to test your existing knowledge of PRINCE2 Foundation. This is also a chance to refresh your memories of what you've learned so far. This is just an informal and just for reference. So don't worry, it doesn't affect your foundation in any way. But by getting a good score here, it will improve your confidence and give you the understanding that you're grounded in the basics of PRINCE2. Of course, keep note of your scores. And if you get something wrong, don't worry too much about it. Go back through the question and try to understand why you got it wrong. This is the purpose of this exam. So, let's start. Question number 1. PRINCE2 mandates that the project board represents the primary stakeholder interests. Which principle does this follows? A. Manage by stages. B. Focus on product. C. Define roles, responsibilities, and relationships. And D. Learn from experience. So those are the 4 possible options. You will see that what we are talking about here are the principles. When we talk about manage by stages, the idea behind that is to make sure that you do not authorize the whole project from start to finish without having stage boundaries where the board gets to inspect what has been done and decide whether or not there's still viability in continuing. So A is not the answer because that has to do with stage boundary, not stakeholders. The second is focus on product. And focus on product is about quality. We want to make sure that the product that we desire is the product that we get at the end of it. Again, this has nothing to do with quality. And if we look at D, learn from experience. While this is a very good idea on a project that we should learn from past experience as well as future experience, this has nothing to do with stakeholders. When it comes to defining the primary stakeholders, we're looking at defined roles, responsibilities, and relationships. This is the key principle that relates to the organization theme where we set up our project structure. So your answer will be defined roles, responsibilities, and relationship. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. Question number 2. Why is change management important in a project? A. Because the stakeholders should understand which organizational areas are impacted by the project. B. Because the project should be described and subject to change control. C. Because confidence is needed that the project can meet its objective and continues to be justified. D. Because user quality expectations of the project's product should be understood. When looking at a question like this, the first thing we want to ask ourselves is, what is change management? Change management is the idea of trying to understand the current state of the organization as well as the target state that we're going to. Change management allows us to navigate from the present state to the future state, using things like our PID as well as our change management approach. So when we look at the D as a possible answer, because user quality expectation of the project product should be understood. This has nothing to do with change management approach. This has to do with quality. When we're capturing things like project product description, we're trying to make sure that we're focusing on product, and that's to do with quality. C says because confidence is needed that the project can meet its objective and continue to be justified. Well, that is true, but has nothing to do with change management. That's more to make sure that our business case remains valid. When we look at B, because the project product should be described and subject to change control. We're not saying it shouldn't be subject to change control, but when it comes to change control, we are talking about issue management approach. Which leaves us to A, because stakeholders should understand which organizational areas are impacted by the change. So if we're going to move from our present state to our future state, we need to be able to define what will be affected along the way so that we can carry people along. So our answer would be A. Question number 3. Which practice establishes mechanism to monitor and compare actual achievement against those planned? A. Progress. B. Plans. C. Issues. D. Quality. When we're looking at the purpose of each of these practices, D says quality, and quality basically makes sure that we are able to capture what it is we want to develop and we have a way of checking it. In quality, we're looking at quality planning, quality control, quality assurance. This is what I want, this is how I'm going to check it, and this is how we can verify that it is being done. So this has nothing to do with comparing what you plan to the actual. When we look at issue practice, issue is about making sure that we have a way of monitoring the baseline in case something changes. We have a way of baselining our product. We know we have 3 types of issues, so if a customer wants to change something, they'll go through the issue management procedure. If the customer receives something that doesn't meet the expectation, they'll go through the issue management procedure. This is how we resolve things. Plan is there to allow us to basically define what it is we want to build, how long it's going to take, how much it's going to cost, how many stages are we going to have, and so on. But this is basically an estimate. Progress is what we use to establish a mechanism to monitor and compare the actual against those plans. So in our plan, as we progress, we're going to start looking at how long is it supposed to cost me to get here? How much have I actually spent? How long is it supposed to take me to get here? How long have I actually taken? And we're going to use that to forecast whether or not we're likely to meet our target. So the correct answer is progress. Progress establishes mechanism to monitor and compare actual achievement against those planned. Question number 4. Which is the purpose of the business case practice? A, to establish mechanism for managing issues that may impact the baseline. B, to establish a method to judge whether the ongoing project is justified. C, to assess and control uncertain events or situation. And D, to describe how products will be delivered that are fit for purpose. Having gone through the foundation course, at this point, you should feel confident in being able to describe the purpose of each practice. So let's go through them. D says to describe how the product will be delivered that are fit for purpose. Well, that's quality. C says to assess and control uncertain event or situation. That is risk. B says to establish method to judge whether the ongoing project is justified. That's business case. And if you want to wrap it up, A says to establish mechanism for managing issues that may impact the baseline. That's your issue practice. So therefore, B is our right answer. To establish method to judge whether the ongoing project is justified. Question number 5. Which statement describes the direction of project process? A says it enables the project board to assure that there is continued business justification. B says it covers day-to-day activities of the project manager. C, it ensures there are regular progress meetings. D, it begins on completion of the initiating a project process. Let's have a look at the possible answers. When answering a question like this, just take your mind back to the PRINCE2 process map. D says it begins on completion of initiating a project process. Let's begin by assessing the options we have here. D says it begins on completion of the initiating a project process. Is that correct? Now let's look through how we start our project. In starting up a project process, we do a sense checking. So we go through all of the things we need, our logs, we write our outline business case, we do our project approach, and so on. And after we've got our project brief and our initiation stage plan, we're going to need to do something. When we get to the end of the starting up a project process, we're going to request to initiate a project. Requesting to initiate a project is what will trigger the directing a project process. So directing a project process is set up right after startup, and it is authorizing initiation that triggers initiating a project process. So we know that directing a project process already begins before initiating a project process. Therefore, it cannot D. C says it ensures that there are regular progress meetings. Well, the aim of the project manager is to make sure that is happening, and the project manager operates in controlling a stage. So that is not where directing a project process is. B says it covers the day-to-day activities of the project manager. Well, that also is controlling a stage, which leads us to A. It says it enables the project board to assure that there is a continued business justification. They need to review what you've done and authorize whether or not they wish to go to the next stage. They will authorize initiation, they will authorize a project, they will authorize a stage, they will authorize exception, they will give you ad hoc advice, and of course they will authorize closure. So A is your right answer. Question number 6. What takes place during closing a project process? A. The post-project benefits review are performed. B. Ownership of the project product is transferred to the customer. C. An end-stage report is prepared for the final stage. And D. The project closure notification is reviewed and approved. We're looking at what takes place during the closing project process. The closing project process is the final process that we have. This is where we do all our last little bits and we hand over everything to the board. So if we look at the options we have here, D says the project closure notification is reviewed and approved. The project closure notification is, the draft of it is done in closing a project process. However, the project closure notification is reviewed and approved in directing the project process. So therefore, D is not an answer, or it's not our answer. C says an end stage report is prepared for the final stage. Now, when you are in a closing a project process, we do not have an end stage report. End stage report is only written while you are in a managing stage boundary. In a closing a project process, we will have instead end project report. So therefore, this is incorrect because it's saying that we're writing an end stage report. So C is incorrect. So B says ownership of the project's product is transferred to the customer. One of the activities that takes place during the closing project process is to make sure that the customer has actually accepted all the outputs of the project. So B is our right answer. And A says the post-project benefits reviews are performed. Post-project benefits, well, it says what is on the tin, which is they happen after the project has closed. And we use closing a project process to basically close the project. So this is outside of the project. So your right answer is B. Ownership of the project's product is transferred to the customer. Question number 7. Which is an objective of the managing a stage boundary? A says to request authorization to start the next stage. B, to ensure all threats and opportunities for the current stage have been closed. C, to ensure that work on products allocated to the team for the next stage is authorized. D, to implement actions to resolve tolerance deviation from the stage plan. Let's have a look at it. D says to implement actions to resolve tolerance deviation from the stage plan. Even though we write let's say there's a breach in tolerance, one of our costs has gone outside of our stage tolerance. The project manager will write the exception report. The exception report will inform the project board that there has been a breach in tolerance. And the exception report will also provide the board with a few options about how to rectify this breach. Once the project board has chosen a suitable option, they will ask the project manager to simply create an exception plan. Granted, the exception plan is going to be created within the stage boundary. However, the actions that will be taken to resolve the deviation from the stage plan will happen within your controlling stage. So therefore, D is incorrect. C says to ensure that the work on the product allocated to the team for the next stage is authorized. Essentially, we want to make sure that when we've done our next stage plan, we've updated our PID, we've written our end stage report, we send it to the board, we want to make sure that they're authorized so that we can go to the next stage. So that is the purpose of the managing stage boundary. That's one of the key objectives of it. So the answer is C. Question number 8. Which is the purpose of the starting up a project process? A, to understand the resources and cost to deliver the project's product. B, to ensure that there is authority to deliver the project's product. C, to do the minimum to decide whether it is worthwhile initiating the project. D, to create the management product required to control the project. If we go through our understanding of starting up a project process, we know the purpose of starting up a project process is basically to sense check whether this is a good idea without spending too much money. If the thing doesn't make sense, we stop it right there. Let's go through our potential answers. D says to create the management product required to control the project. The management product required to control the project will not be created until we reach initiating a project process. This is where we start to do all of our approaches, our project plan, our project controls. This is where all of that takes place. So D is not the right answer. C says to do the minimum to decide whether it is worthwhile initiating a project. This is the purpose of your startup, to do the minimum to decide whether it is worthwhile to initiate a project. Does it make sense? Is it even a worthwhile project? Is it a good project? Before we start to commit a lot of resources to it. So C is your right answer. Question number 9. Which is the purpose of controlling a stage process? A, to agree, perform, and deliver the project work. B, to draft a plan for the next stage. C, to agree tolerances for the next stage. D, to take action so that the stage remains within tolerance. When we look at all of the options that we have here, A looks tempting, but let's have a look at it. To agree, perform, and deliver the project work. Once the project manager has written the work package, it is up to the team manager to accept the work package, to perform the work package, to deliver the work package. So A is not our answer because that will be the purpose of managing product delivery. B says to draft a plan for the next stage. We know that one of the key elements of managing stage boundary is the following. In your managing stage boundary, you will do this. You'll write your end stage report to inform the board about what has happened in that stage so far. You will also update your page so that the board can understand how the project looks at present. And finally, you will write your next stage plan to tell the board, if you were to authorize this project, this is what we're going to do next. So therefore, B is not correct because we draft a plan for next stage plan while we're in managing stage boundary. C says to agree tolerances for the stage. The place where we actually agree tolerances for the stage is in the next stage plan, which takes us back to our previous answer. While we are creating the next stage plan in the managing stage boundary, we're also agreeing the tolerances that we need for that stage to work. So C also happens in managing stage boundary. D says to take action so that the stage remains within tolerance. This is part of the activities that takes place within the controlling the stage. To make sure we take effective control, to deal with risk and issues, to authorize work packages, to monitor work packages, receive completed work packages, to escalate issues and risk, to write exception report. So those are the activities that takes place in there. So your answer is D. Finally, in this 10-question quiz, let's have a look at this. Question 10 says, is the following statement true or false? The managing product delivery process provides accurate progress information to the project manager at an agreed frequency to ensure that expectations are managed. Is this true or false? Now let's look at this. When the project manager authorizes a work package and basically gives it to the team manager and the team manager accepts it, within the work package itself, there will be some controls about how the team manager will inform the project manager about what is going on. That is done in the form of what we call a checkpoint report. A checkpoint report is a time-driven report whereby it is written at an agreed interval. So this will qualify for that. Basically, the managing product delivery process provides accurate progress information to the project manager at an agreed frequency, so that will be your checkpoint report, to ensure that expectations are managed. So therefore, this statement is true. So how did you do? Hopefully you've been following the quiz as we go through it. And by now you can tally your figures and see how well you did. If you get any questions wrong, don't worry too much about it. Just go through the rationale and try the question again. The aim is not to simply get everything right, but to understand the reasons why you got something wrong, even if you got it wrong. By the time you do all of that, you should have a good grasp of this question. Now that we've tested your understanding of foundation, I hope you're confident enough to now continue with this process so that we can start going through some of the practitioner elements. So, what has this section revealed? Your confidence. So, at this point, maybe your confidence is sky high. You got 10 out of 10, so well done. And if you didn't get 10 out of 10, just have a look at the things you got wrong. Your understanding of the key concepts. Those questions are selected questions that tested your understanding of principles, people, it tested your understanding of practices, as well as project context. So we kind of have a good mix in there. And of course, our plan for the course, which will follow.